January 13, 1948. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was assassinated. Within hours, mobs in Maharashtra hunted Brahmins, burned homes, and lynched men in broad daylight. Simply because they were born into a community Nathuram Godse belonged to. Thousands were slaughtered, their wives and children displaced. Newspapers muted the truth, and the Congress establishment buried the numbers. Yet, this hatred did not appear overnight. It was decades in the making. Nurtured, weaponized, and sanctified by one man. Jyotirao Phule. Born in 1827 in Pune, Jyotirao Phule is today glorified as a social reformer, a hero of the oppressed. But peel back the official myths, and you discover a man whose hatred for Hindu civilization was neither spontaneous nor self-made. He was a missionary's protege, a British loyalist, and the ideological ancestor of every anti-Hindu campaign since. According to Phule's biographical accounts, his great-grandfather murdered a Brahmin village clerk, a violent episode often cited in narratives sympathetic to Phule. Yet, no independent historian has verified this tale, and it survives only through missionary-influenced biographies. Whether fact or legend, its inclusion served a purpose: to cast the Phule family as victims of Brahmin oppression, dispossessed and marginalized. The irony, however, is that the Phules were far from destitute. Archival sources show they enjoyed royal patronage under the Peshwas, held tax-free land, and prospered as court florists. Phule's grandfather was even awarded about 40 acres of tax-free land by Peshwa Balaji Bajirao II. But Jyotirao consciously repackaged this comfortable background into a myth of generational suffering. The story of ancestral conflict with Brahmins became a moral license for his life's crusade against Hindu society itself. In other words, the animus seemed less an awakening of conscience and more an inheritance, carefully mythologized. The Phules prospered under the Peshwas but turned against their own roots after British missionaries arrived in Pune. Young Jyotirao, enamored by the Scottish mission, defended them even when they were accused of abducting local children. The reward for this loyalty? English education, missionary sponsorship, and a lifelong debt to Christ's church. They arranged for Jyotirao to learn English and employed his father, Govindrao, as a gardener in the mission compound. Phule writes with gratitude,
"The all-merciful providence took pity on the Shudras and brought about the British Raj to India. By its divine dispensation, which emancipated the Shudras from the physical thraldom. We are much beholden to the British rulers. We shall never forget their kindness to us. It was the British rulers who freed us from the centuries-old oppression of the Bhatt and assured a hopeful future for our children. Had the British not come on the scene, the Bhatt would surely have crushed us in no time.
Phule's entry into public life was carefully constructed to portray him as a fearless crusader against caste oppression. By the late 1840s, missionary schools had already taken root in several Indian presidencies. Yet, Phule's supporters later claimed he started the first school in India welcoming all castes. Two serious problems make this claim untenable. First, Dharampal's meticulous archival work demonstrates that similar schools existed widely across the Madras, Bengal, and Bombay presidencies much before Phule's time. Community-run institutions for agrarian and artisan castes were common, contradicting the myth that caste Hindus universally denied education to lower groups. Second, education in pre-colonial India was often community-based, not racially segregated. Artisans taught their children crafts. Brahmins taught scriptures. And Muslims trained apprentices. What Phule's narrative painted as oppression was often a reflection of occupational specialization, not exclusion. Even more revealing are the records of Phule's own undertakings. G. M. Nalawade notes in his Marathi work, Satyashodhak Sevak, that Phule's first school in 1848, hosted in Bhide's mansion at Budwarpet, was not open to all castes. It was limited to the Marathas. In 1860, Phule established an ashram for widows, ostensibly to provide refuge to destitute women. Yet, serious controversies soon engulfed it. Nalawade records that Phule allegedly mandated the firstborns of pregnant widows to be handed over to local Christian missions, a charge supported by complaints from within his own circle. His close associate, Dr. Vishram, even broke away from the Satyashodhak Samaj in protest, denouncing what he described as misuse of religious sentiment and orphaned children. A decade later, on 24th September 1873, Phule convened his followers to found the Satyashodhak Samaj, the Society of Seekers of Truth. Here too, the facade concealed the familiar loyalty to the empire. Every member had to swear allegiance to the British crown, while the organization's charter declared its mission to liberate the Shudras and Atishudras from Brahmin dominance. Beneath the rhetoric of emancipation, the society functioned as a network of British collaborators, advancing colonial propaganda against Hindu social institutions. Abhinav Chandrachud, in his book, The Seats Are Reserved, writes,
Phule's movement was, in some sense, pro-British and anti-Brahmin.
He felt that the 1857 revolt was a Brahmin movement led by high caste leaders like Tantia Tope. What was really going on here? Who was elevating Phule as a crusader of the so-called depressed castes through a carefully crafted campaign? Short answer, there were two converging interest groups: the British government and the church. Their point of convergence? Brahmins. Long answer, pay attention. Maharashtra had become the nerve center of India's anti-colonial resistance. And at the heart of it all were the Brahmins, from Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Vishnu Shastri Chiplunkar to Gopal Krishna Gokhale. This small community produced some of the fiercest opponents of British rule. The British knew this all too well. As the collector of Tanjore confessed,
There was no class except the Brahmins, which was so hostile to the English.
CID reports revealed that nearly 70% of those shot dead by British bullets were Brahmins. They were barely 4% of Maharashtra's population, yet they spearheaded the intellectual and political revolt against the Raj. Brahmins were the thinkers, writers, and revolutionaries who challenged the empire. The other group that carried a deep grudge against the Brahmins was the Christian missionaries. The institution of caste presented a nearly insurmountable barrier to the mission of converting the heathens to Christianity. And Brahmins were seen as the custodians of tradition and the exemplars of the heathen ideal. As William Carey, known as the father of modern missions, wrote as early as in 1800 CE,
Never was such a combination of false principles as here. The multitudes pay 1,000-fold more deference to the Brahmins than the people did to the priests in papacy's darkest days. And all are bound to their present state by caste, in breaking whose chains a man must endure to be renounced and abhorred by his wife, children, and friends.
In other words, the secular British Empire as well as the Christian Church had a common enemy in the Brahmins. While in Phule, they found a willing henchman, a dubious ally, in their mission to vilify the Brahmin Varna. The hatred for Brahmins was built on the foundation of the now debunked Aryan invasion theory. In his book, Ghulamgiri, Phule writes,
The Brahmins have come from Iran to India, and since the advent of the rule of Brahmins for centuries, the Shudras and Atishudras are suffering hardships and are leading miserable lives.
The inevitable consequence of this conspiracy against the Brahmins was the denigration of Hindu Dharma itself, a task in which Phule excelled beyond all expectations. Along with attacking Hinduism, he also proved to be an outstanding PR agent for the church. In Ghulamgiri, Phule declares,
The American and Scottish Christian missionaries came to India, preached and practiced the true teaching of their Messiah among the Shudras here. They thus emancipated the Shudras from the unnatural and inhuman slavery which was imposed by the wicked Brahmins on them. They thus cut the dog collar of slavery from the necks of the Shudras and flung it definitely at the faces of the Brahmins. Then belated wisdom dawned on the wily Brahmins. They knew in their heart of hearts that these foreign missionaries were determined to end their unnatural and wicked mastery over the Shudras forthwith. Out of this group was born the intense desire in the minds of some wily Brahmins that prompt steps should be taken to drive away the British government from this land.
The outpouring of love for the colonizer in Phule's writings knows no bounds. At another place in his magnum opus, he states,
After the advent of the British rule in India, some kind-hearted Englishmen and Americans were deeply aggrieved at the sad plight of our countrymen. So these noble saints entered this vast prison and proffered a most valuable advice to us.
What was that valuable advice? Phule elaborates on it not just in his books, but through other creative expressions as well. In his play Trutiya Ratna, a poor farmer realizes that he has been systematically deceived by the village Brahmin priest through false rituals, bogus astrology, and manipulative religious demands. The British official, a symbol of rationality and modern education, helps him see that his poverty and suffering are not caused by angry gods, but by human exploitation and ignorance. In that moment of realization, the farmer turns towards the idol of Hanuman, the deity he has long worshipped with devotion, and in a surge of anger and enlightenment, he smashes the idol to pieces. The symbolism is stark and raw, leaving no room for doubt or second thought. Phule never showed any restraint in abusing Hindu deities. He claims that Vishnu's fourth avatar, Narsingha, was actually an Aryan leader who killed the native king Hiranyakashipu. Describing the deity, he writes,
Narasimha was greedy, double-dealing, treacherous, cunning, dangerous, cruel, and heartless.
Perverting the essence of the story of Bhakta Prahlad, Phule portrays Prahlad as lacking agency and being manipulated into having his own father killed by the invading Aryan leader Narsingha. comparing the deity with a prostitute. He writes,
This act alone is proof positive that this Narasimha did not have the intelligence of a mean third-rate concubine in Pune who has cast the spell of her fatal fascination on a certain scholar in Pune.
Not content with humanizing and then dehumanizing Hindu deities, Phule wholeheartedly endorses the destruction of Hindu temples by Islamic invaders. In his book, Shetkaryacha Asud, Cultivator's Whipcord, Phule, the great historian, gleefully provides us a glimpse of India's troubled past.
The bold followers of Hazrat Paigambar started to split the idols at Somnath along with the artificial Hindu religion with their swords and started to liberate the Shudra farmer from the Brahma cunning of the Aryans.
But his admiration of Islamic invaders is not without exception. He is troubled by his own imagination, in which he visualizes Adi Shankaracharya joining hands with the Turks and the Marathas to defeat the Buddhists. He announces,
The crown jewel of the Aryas, the cunning Shankaracharya argued, using every means available with the good Bauddhas and tried to put an end to them in Hindustan. But the Bauddha religion was not even shaken, and when it started growing day by day, Shankaracharya joined the Turki people and the Marathas and defeated the Bauddhas through the swords of these.
all this is just the tip of the iceberg. Every page of Phule's writing drips with hatred for Brahmins and the Hindu religion. He pulls no punches and does the job that his patrons assign to him with great fervor. The anti-Hindu and deeply divisive ideology propagated by Jyotirao Phule left an enduring mark on the socio-religious fabric of Maharashtra. After Phule's death, the Satyashodhak Samaj, founded upon his explicitly anti-Brahminical principles, began to decline in the absence of capable leadership. However, the movement did not vanish. It found a new champion in Shahu Maharaj of Kolhapur, who, as Maureen Patterson notes, revived the Satyashodhak Samaj in 1911. Driven by his own anti-Brahmin motives, Shahu sought to expand Phule's ideology under the guise of social reform. That same year, Shahu established a branch of the Satyashodhak Samaj in Kolhapur, appointing Bhaskara Rao Jadhav as president. The first Satyashodhak conference, chaired by Ramayya Ayyavaru, formally codified the principles of the movement. A new generation of leaders, including Jadhav, Mukundrao Patil and Dinkar Rao Javalkar, reinvigorated the organization in rural Maharashtra, employing more aggressive methods of propaganda. Finding traditional sermons and kirtans ineffective, they turned to tamasha, a popular folk theatre form, to spread their message. Through songs, plays, and dialogues, they glorified Western education while deriding Hindu scriptures and Brahminical traditions. These Satyashodhak Jalsas gained mass appeal, sowing the seeds of social unrest and fostering anti-Hindu sentiment across the Deccan. The Satyashodhak Samaj became increasingly militant, organizing village plays that vilified Brahmins. Phule had founded the anti-Brahmin discourse. Shahu institutionalized it, and its later exponents, most prominently B.R. Ambedkar and E.V. Ramasamy Naikar, expanded it into a nationwide ideology cloaked in the rhetoric of social justice. On 30th January 1948, the assassination of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi by Nathuram Godse triggered violent reprisals against Brahmins across Maharashtra. Historian Vikram Sampath estimates that between 2,000 and 5,000 Brahmins were killed. The Chitpavans were the principal victims, though the violence extended to other Brahmin communities as well. A commission of inquiry under Justice Koyaji was later established to investigate these atrocities. Page 80 of the Koyaji Commission report records how Satyashodhak Samaj member Madhavrao Bagal incited mobs through speeches targeting the Brahmin community. The selective glorification of certain social reformers in India reveals a deeper political design. Genuine pioneers of women's education, such as Hoti Vidyalankar of Banaras, Meenakshi Shastri of Hanuman Ghat, and Sarfoji of Tanjore, are scarcely remembered today despite their substantive contributions. Their erasure stems not from irrelevance, but from their identity as proud Hindus who advanced reform within the Hindu framework rather than in opposition to it. Phule, in contrast, is celebrated precisely because his work aligned with colonial and missionary interests. His denunciation of Hindu tradition and Brahmin society served the British objective of delegitimizing India's indigenous intellectual elite, the very class that had historically spearheaded resistance to foreign rule. Thus, Phule's prominence owes entirely to the colonial utility of his ideology. Anti-Brahminism gained currency not as an organic social movement, but as an instrument of imperial strategy, designed to fracture India's cultural and political cohesion. The poisonous fruit of this ideology was seen most vividly in 1948, when thousands of innocent Brahmins were murdered and dispossessed, not for their actions, but for their birth. What Phule sowed, Shahu spread, and Ambedkar and Periyar expanded, culminated in a politics of bloodshed. Anti-Brahminism, therefore, cannot be romanticized as progress. It was a colonially amplified movement aimed at weakening Hindu society's intellectual core, whose tragic consequences continue to reverberate through modern India.